So there we go, folks. F1 is back, and we just witnessed what I would call an acceptable race to kick the season off. Not awesome, not terrible, but acceptable. You know, Bahrain's a decent circuit. There was a fair amount of battles going on, and it gave us a pretty good insight as to what we might expect for the rest of the season. But all in all, and let me know what you think of this, despite the hype and the doom and gloom regarding certain teams this year, that felt like we were watching round 25 of the 2023 season. Max is driving around in his Starship, Leclerc is still cursed, Hulk was in Q3, and Sargent was nowhere. Everything you can expect from a 2023 season. I did enjoy the handing out of proper trophies at the end of the race on the podium ceremony. Actual proper trophies and not just bodged together marketing tools. That was great to see in F1, and good job Bahrain. And also pretty much all of my predictions in my last video have aged like milk. Seriously bad. Honestly, it's not just aged milk now, it's a rotting 30-year-old pack of Wensleydale by now. And so with that, let's look at my review of the Grand Prix and a few interesting takes from it as well. So let's start by looking at the 1-2 finishers. Red Bull. I mean, who else is it going to be, really? They were utterly dominant and just kicked things off in an exact way that we could have expected, really. Maximum points, a 1-2 finish, a fastest lap. Max was absolutely untouchable, and Perez just fulfilled his job description perfectly. It's actually quite worrying when you consider the Red Bull have even more updates to bring to future races, even after seeing their pace at the first race. I genuinely thought they'd be getting more hassle from Ferrari during this race, but I guess this is just one circuit layout, and we're going to have to wait and see how things go on at Saudi Arabia and Australia as well. And this is just what we expect from Red Bull at this stage. We didn't really see Max for the entire race, and once Perez got by Russell and Sainz, that was the last we saw of him too. Anyway, fair play to Max, and Perez did a really solid job there as a number 2 driver. But then it was Ferrari who were predicted to be the main threat to Red Bull this year, were nowhere near them, with Sainz finishing 3rd and Leclerc finishing 4th. They were kind of back to their old habits from last year of qualifying very well, but then losing time by fighting with Mercedes during the race. And also, by this stage, can we just say that Leclerc still seems to be cursed? I think that actually might be the case. Sainz, on the other hand, got the absolute maximum out of the car, overtaking his teammate, finishing on the podium, and getting voted driver of the day. Not a bad job at all. The smooth operator did it again, but Ferrari really need to kind of shape up quickly if they are going to stand any chance of taking points off Red Bull this year. Also, did anyone notice when the top 3 cars pulled into Parc Fermé for the podium ceremony and they got out of their cars? The Red Bull crew were there to celebrate with Max and Sergio, but poor old Sainz just seemed to be there by himself. There wasn't anyone to celebrate there with him at all, it looked like. Maybe once again at Ferrari, the wrong guy finished ahead, like this wasn't in the script. But then Mercedes, on the other hand, more or less met expectations, with Russell finishing 5th and Hamilton coming 7th. They do seem much happier with their car this season, and whilst it may not be enough to fight with the Ferraris yet, they were finding themselves mixing with the McLarens this time. But with George running 2nd for a portion of the race, it was looking very positive for some time. But right now it looks like there's still a lot of work to do. The Mercedes does seem to get through its tyres much quicker than the Ferraris. The pit stops are still taking a fraction too long, and Russell just needs to stop looking in his mirrors when he's under pressure from the car behind. Just like in Singapore last season, he's under pressure, he looks in the mirrors, makes a mistake, car drives right by. Credit to Hamilton though, stealthily salvaging his race and climbing up the grid. He was complaining of a broken seat earlier in the race, but thanks to an error from Piastri, he was able to snatch those extra points. It was probably bang on what Mercedes were hoping for at this race. Now in contrast, McLaren had an absolutely fantastic opener compared to last season, and appeared to be in exactly the same position as when last season finished, with Norris finishing 6th and Piastri 8th. Lando, I think, had a very solid race. He drove maturely, he held his own, and finished roughly where he kind of expected to, I think. Which is great actually, considering all the worried faces at pre-season testing. Piastri, on the other hand, had a bit more of a challenging time, losing a position to Hamilton whilst coming out of the pits with fresh tyres. That was a bit of a knock, but he was still right in there in that McLaren-Mercedes mix. It's not like he was running around in 12th or something, so he was still competitive and right up there with kind of where he was supposed to be. Overall, McLaren, I think, have a lot to take forward to Saudi Arabia, because now they know they can mix it with Mercedes. Then you had Aston Martin, and it was just business as usual when you compared to how last season finished, with Alonso finishing 9th and Stroll 10th. And it was a bit disappointing for them, really. I wasn't expecting them to be that far behind Mercedes and McLaren, especially Alonso. I have to admit though, when I did see Stroll spinning off at the start, I was thinking, here we go again. But as it was Hülkenberg who punted him off, we'll let you off there, Lance. But then for Lance to go from dead last and climb all the way up to 9th and then hand his position over to Alonso, that was a hell of a race for him. And it does show when he is confident and happy, he can really put in some decent drives. I'd say Alonso will be very disappointed with that race though, from starting 6th, dropping all the way down to 10th and then being bumped up a position to 9th. Really not the start he was hoping for. Aston really need to bring it at the next race and make sure that that points gap between them and McLaren and Mercedes doesn't get wider than it already is. Now for the first of the 0 points finishers at this race, we have Sauber, who were pretty anonymous this time round. Guan Yu finishing 11th and Bottas all the way down in 19th. Guan Yu had a solid drive but didn't really have a chance of catching Stroll in 10th. I mean, they were probably hoping for a safety car or a yellow flag, so yeah, where's Latifi or Grosjean when you need them? And Bottas had a bit of a shocker as well, lost out at the start of the race and had a very slow pit stop due to a faulty wheel nut. Lost around 50 seconds in that pit stop and then was kind of unable to challenge for anything after that. But with a better start, better tyre management and better pit stops, maybe points could be on the cards for Sauber, Saudi Arabia. What else can I say about Sauber? Their car seems to be much more green on TV in night races than we expected. And that's kind of it really. Now with Haas, I have to say, what a turnaround in expectations from what we saw in pre-season testing and off-season compared to what we have now, with Magnussen finishing 12th and Hülkenberg an unlucky 16th. Fueling the 2023 deja vu even further, Hulk managed to get into Q3, but unfortunately a disastrous start ruined his chances of any points. And although Magnussen started lower than Hülkenberg, he really held his own and drove cleanly and finished a very respectable 12th. I'm not sure what Komatsu has done, but that one lap pace is still there at Haas, and also they don't seem to chew through their tyres anymore. And this is what killed them last year, so they might surprise a few people. So if I was Alpine, I'd be very, very worried right now. The confidence boost this will give them going into round 2 will be enormous, and who knows, some Q3 qualifying, good tyre management, no racing incidents, Haas could snatch some points this year. Now I'm a bit confused actually with RB or VCarb or whatever they want us to call them this week. Despite Ricciardo finishing 13th and Tsunoda 14th, I was really expecting a lot more from them, especially after all the hype pre-season. I guess we all kind of expected them to have a lot more pace and be a bit more threatening to the top teams, but we were just given a carbon copy of AlphaTauri from 2023, just painted differently. I'd like to hear what you guys think on this, but some of those radio communications before and after they did the switcheroo with Tsunoda and Ricciardo did not give me the impression of a good dynamic there between the drivers. Tsunoda being asked to let Ricciardo through so he could have a crack at Magnussen seemed like a good plan. After all, Ricciardo was faster at the time. But then it was a bit unfair that they didn't reverse the positions when the plan didn't work out. And I can imagine Tsunoda must be fuming right now. It's amazing in hindsight to think that this was the team to be worried about this year. And it just shows what boredom combined with pre-season testing and a bit of controversy can actually do. They've got a lot of work to do for the season ahead. So now we get to Williams, and there were some positives to take away from this race, but there was also some quite worrying negatives there as well, with Albon finishing 15th and Sargent 20th and a full 2 laps down. Now Albon had good pace early on, knocking around 11th position, business as usual, but then some gremlins intervened and it all got a little bit messy. There were some issues with their new steering wheel and its new built-in display, electronics, and overheating problems as well. Watching some of the onboard footage, all these things were popping up on the screen that was very distracting, and even Brundle said in commentary that it was much too bright. It's like having your phone on full brightness at night time. It's far too much. And with all that going on, Albon unfortunately dropped down to a disappointing 15th, but not as disappointing as the other guy. Now Sargent had even more teething problems with his steering wheel. In fact, he had to get his replaced during the race with another one, writing off any chances of anything and effectively turning his race into a testing session. Granted, he was unlucky with technical issues, but Sargent has to do a hell of a lot of convincing this season, especially as Williams are looking to move up a bit. A lot of work to do for Williams ahead, who absolutely must retain 7th place in the Constructors' Championship. Now, this last one, I couldn't believe this. I was stunned at the sheer state of Alpine at the Bahrain Grand Prix, with Ocon finishing 17th and Gasly 18th. These were actually the last of the runners without any major issues. They were even more rubbish than we expected, and this feeling of impending crisis has to be in full swing now at Alpine. Ocon was ahead of Gasly for most of the race, but they were anonymous for most of it. They were absolutely nowhere. I know we're only one race in and things might change, but I sense that Alpine are in for their toughest season yet. And this is going to test the team, test the drivers, and I think it's going to test Renault as well, who may have to do a drastic overhaul of the entire operation. The thing is, these guys have the most to do, and even if they worked the hardest of any of the 10 teams on the grid, I'm still not convinced it would really get them anywhere this season. A seriously tough year ahead for them, I think. So there we are. Please be sure to like and subscribe. Let's wait and see what happens at round 2 in Saudi Arabia. I'm Paul. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you later.